guys, welcome to Better Bachelor. My name is Joker with a face radio and a voice for print. Recently, for the last, 3 years, 4 years, I do news stories and I tell you what's going on in the news. We talk about all the crazy stories that are out. But before I did news stories, I actually just told my personal life stories of my divorces, 2 of them, and my problems with dating and what I'm seeing out in the real world. And then when I said, well, I'm kind of out of stories, I guess I'll read some news stories and talk about it. That covered the next 3 or 4 years on my channel. Well, today, we're going back in the past just a little bit. I'm going to tell you some of my life stories because it has a lot to do with what's going on today and the inaffordability, young men struggling, young men falling out, young men giving up because the dreams of having a wife and kids and a little house on the hill and their own property seem to be falling away. And men are just giving up. I saw this headline, falling behind struggling young men in today's workforce. The average home sales price in the United States for 2025 is projected to be $500,000, $512,000. Now, even when I was working as a network engineer at Cisco, making $110,000, $120,000 a year, I wouldn't have bought a $500,000 home, and that's making a really good income. I don't feel I could have afforded $500,000 home. The payments on something like that are, $4,000 or $5,000 a month. And if anything happens to your job or you get laid off or whatever, you're screwed. Like you're out of a house. So a lot of guys have said, you know what, I'm giving up, or you can't win in this. And so my video today is to recognize a couple different things because there's a debate going on X between people my age or maybe a little bit younger, or a little bit older, saying, hey, we had it hard too, and young people today saying, shut the fuck up. You have no idea what hard is. Today is actually hard. So I'm sure I'm going to upset somebody, and some of you younger guys or older guys or whatever, and that's not my intention. I'm not here to stoke fires and say why I'm right and you're wrong. And the other thing too is a lot of the examples and a lot of things I'm going to talk about, you're going to say, well, I live in such and such an area and cars here are more expensive, or you can't buy a trailer, or you can't buy land because I'm in the UK and it's unaffordable. And I get it. And so not everything I say is going to cover your situation. But what I'm hoping is that I can give you a little bit of hope and maybe give you some ideas that you can put forward and try to get ahead enough that at least you're not paying the exorbitant rent and making other landlords money, whether they own the property and they're pocketing your cash, or in many of these buildings, and younger people don't seem to understand this, and I don't know why, in many of these buildings that landlords rent out, they have a mortgage on them, and if they don't have enough renters, they can't pay their mortgage, and they lose their property too. So not all landlords are evil, although I know some of them are. My point, though, is to try to touch base with you guys and say, maybe there is hope out there, or maybe if you, are creative or are willing to make some sacrifices. This all started off with this argument that I saw on X, and I jumped in, and of course I got a lot of people mad at me. This middle-class party says, older generations say, oh, also, before I get into this, at the end of this video, I have my bus build. Now, the reason I'm including my bus build is when I first started doing this channel, a lot of times I'd set up my camera and I was sitting on my bus, and then in the middle of the day when I was building out my bus, I would do my video and I'd talk about things with the guys. And I think I had 300 followers at the time, but I took an old bus, a 1985, I think it was, school bus that was on auction. I bought it for about $6,000. I spent 10 grand. So for about $15,000 or $16,000, I made a nice RV that I was planning to drive around the country. And then the engine broke on me two times. And I fixed it once. And then, a week or two later, it broke down again when I was in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And I couldn't afford to keep driving it because I couldn't keep fixing it. And so in Cheyenne, Wyoming, I gave it to somebody that could give it away to donate it. And I believe, at least what they told me, is there was a couple, husband and wife, that it had it and had parked it on a small piece of property that was given to them. They were not doing very well. I guess he'd lost his job or something or other. And they were using it to live in. So somebody's living in my bus today, hopefully. But I'll show you the bus build at the end of this because I want to show you with creative ideas and a little bit of money, you can get ahead. Now, maybe you'll never own the dream home on the hill. I get that. But again, it's about thinking outside of the box a little bit and finding ways you don't have to give your money to somebody else. You can give it to yourself. And whether you want to invest it in something, whether you want to save it, whatever you want to do, there is hope for you. So that'll be at the end of this video. I'll leave the timestamp down below. So the middle class party says, older generations say we all struggled in our 20s. No, you didn't. You didn't pay $2,200 for rent, $7 for eggs. You didn't graduate into $50,000 student debt and zero job security. Gen Z isn't dramatic. They're drowning. This got 181,000 likes on it. And I commented on it. I said, I lived in my car for a few months, even while employed, and slept on a friend's couch where 4 of us split a 2-bedroom apartment. Yes, it's tough, so maybe stop buying $7 coffees and get a second job. To which a lot of people either agreed with me or many younger people pushed back and they said, no, you still don't get it. That's a boomer take. And after talking with various people and after looking into this a little bit more, I think 2 things can be true at the same time. Number one, the younger generation today doesn't want to just live a life of only work and just putting your nose to the grindstone, just working. They say we should be able to go to the movies. We should be able to go out and get a bite to eat. Why do you have to just hate life and just put your nose to the grindstone and work for 2, 3, 4, 5 years just to get enough saved up and enough going for you that you can be comfortable? That's not a good way to live. I think they're right in that. That my generation, we were told you're going to have to work for 3, 4, 5 years. You're not going to have much to your name. You're going to struggle. You're going to suffer. But with the experience you gain out of that and the struggle will make you stronger and more resilient for the future. And I think that's right too. And I worked 2 jobs pretty much all the way through until my 40s. I always had a full-time job, sometimes 2 full-time jobs, sometimes a full-time and a part-time job. And that was my life. And we were raised that, hey, you're going to struggle and things suck. But eventually, if you're smart and you're creative, you can work your way through it. And so we see the younger generation as you're being lazy and you're spoiled because you keep getting your Uber Eats and drinking your $7 coffees and all the videos of people whining that they can't make it and they're living in their cars. My generation looks at that and says, oh, you had a car? Must have been nice. And so, again, I think 2 things can be true at the same time. I'm gonna read this. I'm gonna play it and read it because there's just cringe music in the background. Point of view, you lost your job and now you're living in your car. Now, I understand this is where you're probably going to get mad at me, but understand where my youth was, that I grew up in a decent household, but when I hit 18, my father did the same thing his father did to him. You're on your own. I didn't have a car. I bought a used motorcycle. It was a Yamaha 400cc. I don't remember the exact model, but it was a 1970. Now, remember, this is in when did I buy my bike? 1987 or 1988. When I was in high school, my last 2 years of high school, I drove a motorcycle when I didn't want to take the bus, and I used my motorcycle to go to a part-time job I had at Burger King while I was working in high school. I paid for that bike myself. It cost me a couple $100, and it sucked. Especially since I lived in upstate New York. It was cold. And many months out of the year, I couldn't drive my motorcycle. So I ended up bumming a ride from friends or walking or riding a bicycle on dirt roads. So they weren't quite as slippery as pavement would be with snow on it. I still rode a bicycle, my cheap 10-speed that I had since I was 12 years old. I drove that bike to my jobs. So in a case like this, again, this is the difference between the generations and why I think there's some arguments with this. Some people look and they say, my gosh, a young person like this today shouldn't have to live in their car. And I agree with that. But then when somebody my age looks at this, I say, oh, you have a car? Well, that's nice. I didn't have one of those for many, many years until I was at least, I think a year or 2 into my military deployment. And I got a 1992 Honda Civic. It was new, but I ordered it without a radio and air conditioning and manual everything. And I got it for about $9,000, which in today's dollars with inflation would be about $19,000. A very cheap car. and my payments were like $250. And with the insurance, I struggled to pay it because I was 19 or 20 years old and I couldn't afford it. But when somebody like me sees this, I'm like, well, it looks like that's a nice leather or either a pleather interior. I see power stuff. You still have jewelry on. You didn't have to pawn that. You looks like you have a little bit of makeup on. You can still afford makeup. Are you really having it that bad? And I realize that's not necessarily fair. But again, when I was probably around her age, when I did have an apartment, there were, what was it? It was a couple of bedrooms. My friend Jason, myself, a guy named Alan, a guy named Scott, and I'm forgetting somebody else. There were 4 or 5 of us. And if you know upstate New York, they took an old home and renovated it, and they split it down the middle, and they make it into what's called a duplex. We 5 guys lived on one side of the duplex where it was a 2-bedroom, 1 bath. And occasionally we might have another guy crash with us. And we were all working horrible jobs. I worked at a Texaco gas station when they had full serve gas stations. And I'd be cleaning people's windshields while I'm filling up their tank. They didn't tip you. And I was making, I think, what was minimum wage back then? $3.75, $5.25, somewhere around there an hour. And so when you rent, they say, well, that's $800 a month for a 2-bed, 1 bath. And everybody says, well, that's great. Yeah, but when I got my paycheck after taxes for a full week's work, it was like $75 or $100. It was nothing. So even if I saved up all month and after taxes maybe had $400, I couldn't have split that with another guy. Or if I did, I wouldn't be able to buy any food. So we split it amongst 4 or 5 of us so we could have enough money that we could buy ramen noodles and a loaf of bread and a jar of peanut butter to eat. Maybe a can of SpaghettiOs, but that was living on the high side of life. We could barely afford our gas for our vehicles if we were lucky enough to have them. Again, it's not about, and this is not about me and my struggles, because we all have our struggles. But I think the younger generations think the older ones had it way easier. And I think the older ones look at the younger generations and say, yeah, but you're not sacrificing enough. And the younger generations are saying, yeah, but why should we? Anyway, the next one, have you ever been so hungry you'd do anything for a meal? Yes, ramen noodles. Back then for us, they were 14 or 15 cents a pack when you bought them in bulk. Today, I think they're about 50 to 60 cents a pack. So about keeping up with inflation. He said, I don't have any gas. I'm kind of stranded in a parking lot. Been here for around 4 days now. I'm still making it work. I'm just thinking about going on the side of the road and begging for money. Someone else, I'm homeless living in my car below freezing temperatures. And I look at this and I say, you have a Yeti cooler. You have a nice vehicle. It's clean. You have obviously a nice mattress in there. You have a GPS and a phone mount. You have a cell phone. This is way more than I had when I was struggling. I had a motorcycle. I couldn't have even lived in it if I had to. Someone else, I live in my car. Someone else, I live in my car for 11 months. This chick, same thing. I choose to live in my car for 6 months. When I look at this, my buddy's car that actually had a car, he had a 1982 Chevy Chevette, I think it was. The lining on the roof had come out, and so did the padding. You could see the underside of the metal. My other buddy had a 1975 Duster with a straight 6 in it. It ran like hell. It went through as much oil as it did gas. I look at this and I say, but you have nice clothes, and your hair is cut, and it's pretty, and you have a nice interior car that's clean. That's better than we had it in many cases. And so maybe that's the big disconnect, is that the young people today don't think the older generation went through it like they did. And maybe we didn't as bad, but it was certainly different. Young people today, you have a cell phone, which has email. That's your job application. That's your research. You can look for jobs on your phone. You can go into a Starbucks and get free Wi-Fi. You can plug in a computer, a laptop, which we also didn't have in my youth, and you can look up things, type out your resume, go to someplace and print it for 35 cents a page. You have all these things that are amazing. When I was a young person, you look for jobs in a newspaper, and you had to pay 25 or 35 cents for the daily newspaper, and you'd look for your job, you'd circle it, And sometimes they'd have a phone number, and I'd have to go down a couple of blocks and pump quarters into a payphone because I could not afford a landline. All of us guys didn't. We didn't have cable TV. I think one of the guys had a 20-inch, maybe it was a 20 or an 18-inch, 20-inch TV that was color, but we had rabbit ear antennas on it so we could pick up 2 or 3 local channels just to have something on TV. We bought board games from the local Goodwill shop, bought a couple of board games for $1 or $2, and we played cards. And that's what we did. We played cards. We played board games. We'd hang out and just be stupid. We didn't have all these luxuries that young people have today. When we needed to prepare a resume to hand it into a company, we typed it on a typewriter. We didn't have a typewriter. I had to go to my mom's house and use her typewriter to type up my resume to pass it out to try to get a job. And when it comes to that, things were a lot tougher for my generation. Young people today, you've got social media for entertainment. You've got friends. You've got games on your phone, even if you can't afford a laptop. You've got cars, your people living in their cars. That was a luxury to us. Does it mean that we had it harder? Does it mean young people today have it harder? Or does it mean that just things are so vastly different between the generations? We each have our struggles in our own ways. I don't know. But I look at this younger generation and say, you have it so much better than we did. How can you complain? The difference is we didn't have any fun. We didn't have much enjoyment. Hanging out with the guys playing cards or a board game while we sat around eating our ramen noodles and watched, I don't know, ABC, CBS, or NBC, the only 3 channels, and PBS, the only 4 channels we got on an old rabbit-eared television. That was all we had. There was no fancy cars to sleep in. We didn't have anything. We're just praying for a second job because at least at the jobs, you're making money and you're not bored sitting at home with nothing to do, thinking about spending your money. And then when I finally joined the military, yes, I had a roof over my head. I finally was able to afford cable. We still didn't have internet, of course. We did have dial-up, actually, and I could afford a landline phone. But I still didn't have many luxuries. I think the biggest luxury I had was a pager where people could get in contact with me when I wasn't at my dorm room. But outside of that, it was still mostly hanging out with people and just being around other people for our entertainment because it was free. Granted, today, young people say, we don't have that. You have to do that online. I don't have a group of friends. It's impossible to get friends. That was never an issue in my day. Could it be just that things are that different between generations? A liberal woman has quit her full-time job because she was required to work 40 hours a week. She said, I literally haven't showered in 3 weeks because I haven't had time. 40 hours a week is too exhausting. I'll play this through.
So I quit my job because I can't take care of my basic needs and work 40 hours a week at the same time. It's really hard to say this out loud and put it online, but I know that I'm not the only person going through this. I've almost been fired from every job that I've ever had, and it's not because I'm not smart. I actually tend to overperform in the beginning.
If you tend to overperform in the beginning, and then you slack off, that's probably why. Even if you overperform, and also if you don't shower but every 3 weeks, you're probably you're definitely the stinky person. See, I look at this, and I know I put on the title card men, and this is a woman, but I'm seeing mostly left-leaning men in these cities that are doing the same thing. They're having mental breakdowns because their parents held them by their little hands and got them their jobs and yelled at the teacher anytime their son misbehaved and yelled at the teacher and said, not my little prince, he's perfect. And then they grow up and they say, well, life's too hard. Life's unfair. Just looking at her background, she has wall decorations, like paintings or posters. She has jewelry. Her hair's nicely braided. We didn't have anything close to that. She's got her nails painted as well, or not painted, but they're nicely manicured. I look at that and I'm like, that's a lot better than I had. She has jewelry on. None of us certainly could have afforded jewelry. We could barely afford to put food in our mouths. And then you say 40 hours a week is too much work and you can't bathe yourself for 3 weeks because you don't have free time. 8 hours a day for 5 days leaves you 16 hours that are free. If you sleep for 8 hours, getting a full night's rest, that still gives you 8 hours to do other things like going to the gym. Or if you say, I can't afford the gym, you can go running. You can do push-ups. You can do body squats. You can grab a cement block from the backyard and hold it on a shoulder while you do some squats. You can curl the cement block. I don't know how much cement blocks weigh, but you could do it if you wanted to gain muscle somehow. Are you going to tell me you didn't have enough time to clean? So then people my age point to people like this, and I know she's not the youngest generation, saying, look, y'all are just lazy. There was I did look this up, and I'll keep going on my rant. And it's not against you younger people. I just think so many people today say, well, it's a little bit challenging. This is hard. I give up. And I understand that. But I think that's a big generational difference is I was told I couldn't give up. If you give up, you're homeless. There are no social programs for you. Nobody cares about you. You're on your own. You don't want to work? Fine. You're going to live underneath a bridge somewhere because you're young and you're able-bodied. We're not giving you any free money. Young people today are now not working, and they're collecting government assistance. We didn't have government assistance. It wasn't a choice. Well, I mean, we did for like single mothers and things like that, but it wasn't much money. It was enough to barely feed them and keep them going, to incentivize them to find somebody like a man, and the man could make some money. I asked Grok, what was a worse economy for young people today for finding a home, affording rent, getting a job, and making a living wage versus 1975? I specifically asked 1975 because that's during Jimmy Carter and when we had the oil crisis and gas, cars were in lines to get gas. Joblessness was high, cost of living was high, we had stagflation. It was probably the previous time we really had some problems. They said finding a home or affording rent, change pricing, everything else. Young people today are more likely to live with parents due to the costs. Overall, housing is much less affordable now. So young people do have it harder today than even back, 50 years ago. Going back 50 years, young people today have it harder than the previous generation. So young people are right in saying, we have it harder than you did, dude. They're right. Unemployment rate, 1975, 16%. Today, 10%, at least in 2024. So it was a little harder to get a job back then. They say cost of living today has risen faster than wages, making a living wage harder to achieve today. Back then, median income, 1975 adjusted to 2024, was $48,000. So if you adjust for inflation. In 2024, it's $46,000. So here we are 50 years later, and people adjusted for inflation are making 4% less. So people today in 2024, on average, are making 4% less than people in 1975 when adjusted for inflation. And the minimum wage in 2024 is $7.25, and the minimum wage in 1975 adjusted for today's inflation would have been $12.50 an hour. Real change, 42%. So if you're making minimum wage today, it's worth 42% less than minimum wage was in 1975. It says today is worse for young people in most respects. Housing and rent are far less affordable, with costs outpacing inflation by 60 to 80%. Wages have stagnated, and they say in 1975, despite a recession, affordability was better and wages supported basics more readily. So it's not that young people today are wrong. Young people today are right. They have it harder than I did. So I guess it's fair to say young people today have it worse off than anyone else alive right now, that is still alive. Even those people that are, 50, 60, 70, 80 years old. You'd have to be 70 to be in the work world in 1975. Young people have it worse today. They're not making this up. They're not just whining. They're not crying. It is worse today. However, that being said, I think there's a lot of opportunity for young people to be able to grind it out a little bit and do better for themselves. But the problem is they have to sacrifice their happiness for it. And is it fair to sacrifice happiness to try to get ahead? Or should people be able to have both? Should people be able to say, you know something, I should be able to have affordable housing. I should be able to afford living if I work a decent job for 40 hours a week. I shouldn't have to have a part-time job. I shouldn't have to have a full-time and a part-time job, is really what I meant to say, just to be able to put a roof over my head. I don't think they're wrong. I think they've got a solid argument. For them to be able to say, well, I think I should be able to at least have a car that runs decent and a job, be able to get me to my job, and then come home and put a roof over my head and be able to have a TV or a computer so I can keep in touch with the rest of the world. I should be able to buy fast food a couple times a week, or if I wanted to, be able to afford salad and grass-fed beef a couple times a week. Like, why should we have to give up all of this happiness just to be able to survive? And in my era, we never thought that way. My era just said, well, you're going to work and it's going to suck and you're going to struggle. And it's going to be probably several years till you can get ahead and you get comfortable in life. But you'll make it. You'll be all right. And we found a way. My 20s kind of sucked. I mean, as far as my social life, it was great because nobody could afford to do anything. So most of the time we could afford to get some cheap beer. And we found a couple of girls and we'd hook up and we'd probably spend most of our days shagging. Most young people today would think that's pretty awesome. We did too. We didn't need the video games and we didn't need the internet. We didn't need all this other stuff because we still had social lives and we were able to date. And we were able to get halfway decent girls that would be our girlfriends. And we just, when you're from a small town, the joke is, what do you do all day? You're either fighting, drinking, or sleeping with somebody or fishing. Sometimes all four at once, if you go to the right house party. So maybe it's just the world's just different today. And maybe young people do have it, just worse. Maybe two things are true at the same time. Like I said, maybe our social lives were great and we didn't have all the gadgets and you didn't need a telephone because your neighbors were your friends, or you didn't need a car because you could walk to your job because towns were smaller. You didn't need, Uber Eats and all the fast food because you could easily get groceries by walking to the grocery store instead of having to go to a Walmart that was 30 miles away. Maybe times were just different. I don't know. One thing I'll say is that the mindset of, I'm never going to own a home. What am I even doing this for? This all sucks. I quit. That's not going to get you ahead. And you still can get ahead. Yes, it means sucking. It means life's going to suck for a while. It means putting your nose to the grindstone. It means making sometimes big, miserable sacrifices. And I still think you can get ahead. It's just, do you want to or not? Do you feel like it's worth it? I can't answer that for people. I did look up some things just to show you how much pricing has changed, even in my lifetime. I went back and I found one of the houses that I had purchased back in 2003. And in the 3 years I lived there, I made 4.9% price increase in the 3 years that I lived there. That 4% went to the realtor that helped us sell it. So I basically broke even. And if you go all the way up to 2017, just 8 tender years ago, so from 2003 to 2017, in those 14 years, the price of the home increased by $24,000, roughly about $1,500 a year. The value of the home increased. From 2017 until now, if you trend it along the same $1,500 a year, from 2017 to 2025, in those 8 years, it would be roughly $12,000 more. So at 187, you'd think this would be selling for $199,000 if the price of goods was going up at the same rate. Instead of selling for $199, Zillow estimates this based on the homes around it in the area. They estimate its value at $403,000. That's more than double in 8 years. So instead of increasing the same trend that had gone from 2003 until 2017, and so instead of the same trend for those 14 years and just 8, it has jumped up over twice. I look at this and say, I couldn't afford the home that I had. Like myself, I can't afford this home. Even back then it was a struggle for me. I couldn't buy this house today, even though I'm doing better financially than I was back then. This is now, I'm priced out of the old home, the own home that I used to own. I looked at the average price by state in 2025. In The average home sales price is $512,000. Now, of course, in Hawaii, it's $1 million per house, and West Virginia is $170,000 for the average, which means you can get it cheaper than 170. There's going to be 300, and there's going to be probably $60,000 homes. And it means it's going to be a fixer-upper with not much land, but you can buy a home. It just means you need to probably live in West Virginia. I think here in Tennessee, it's closer to 210,000 maybe, so it's a little bit higher. I can see why young people give up. People today can't afford a $170,000 home, but it's not going to be luxurious. It's not going to have a lot of land, and it's going to be a fixer-upper, and you're going to have a mortgage for the next 30 years. So it's not to say that young people need to give up, but there's going to have to be sacrifices made, and different sacrifices than the ones that people my age had to make. Now, again, what I'm going to say now wouldn't fit for a lot of you. I have viewers in the Philippines and in the UK and in Germany, and we're a different breed here in the United States. So maybe instead of being able to buy a little plot of land and getting a trailer or something like that, maybe you're in the UK and you say, well, I can't afford land. Rich farmers have all the land. Okay, but maybe you can get a flat, like a studio flat, and get 2 or 3 or 4 roommates that you don't mind putting bunk beds in there and living like a military dorm. I lived in a military dorm at 18. It wasn't the end of the world. A lot of guys aren't hooking up with women anyway, so it's not like you're going to be embarrassed by having to bring a girl back to your place and shagging her in the bathroom because you got 3 dudes giggling outside your door that are in your living room. But my whole point is the biggest flex you can do right now, I think, if you're a young man today, and if I had to do it over, would be to cut my expenses down to 0. I would go back to eating ramen noodle and buying a jar of peanut butter and a loaf of bread just to have some sustenance. Because when you're young, calories are calories. When you get to be my age, that makes you fat very quickly. But when you're young, you can get away with that. And I'd be working a full-time job and a part-time job, or 2 full-time jobs if I could get it and manage the schedules. And yeah, life would suck. But you don't have time to do anything but really get a bite to eat, hang out with your friends for a few minutes, and sleep. And that's what I did for probably my first 3-4 years in the workforce. Even when I was in the military, I had a part-time job as a security guy over at Sears. And so my shift in the military was from 10 p.m. until 6 a.m. because I worked night shift. I'd get a quick bite to eat, and then I'd sleep until, I forget if it was 10 or 11 o'clock, something like that. And I would go in and I would work Sears, and that was a part-time job. So I'd work 4 to 6 hours most days, as many days as I could get. I'd come home, I'd sleep for a couple more hours, and then I'd go into my police shift. I did that for a couple of years, and I was able to save up enough to, get a decent car, afford to have a girlfriend that I could shag every once in a while. It's probably why she cheated on me. I was always at work. But the point is, I was able to at least start getting ahead a little bit through sucking at life. Whether you do it by having multiple roommates, whether you do it in the way I'm going to suggest how I would do it today living in the United States. And maybe this doesn't work for you, and I don't have that answer. But the whole idea I'm trying to do is say, look, here's how I would do it. Like, it's not the end of the world. There are ways you could probably make this work for you, and it'll suck. But maybe it's enough that you can get enough experience. And sometimes, that saying, you need money to make money, right? You need money to invest. You need money to get that car so you can go to a better job that's further away. You need that money for a better laptop because you work online or you want to do art. You need a little bit of money to get you going. If I had to do it all, this is how I would do it. Okay. I looked up some land. And don't forget, I've got the bus video at the end of this that I'll show you. I did this once. Like, I've already done this once, except for the land. I bought the bus. I should have bought the land, but I didn't like it out west because I'd never be able to grow a garden and I wouldn't be sustainable. And the winters were just brutal out there. Too cold, too much. I like visiting, but I don't like that much cold. But if I were to redo it today, I would have kept my bus. I would have bought this little plot of land. I would have parked my bus on this plot of land, and I would have had my home. But I'm going to show you how you could do it if you don't have a bus and you just want to start from scratch. But again, my bus will explain everything I did to it. I found this. This is 1/3 of an acre. There's no homeowners association, so you don't have dues for that. The taxes were cheap. It was about $100 or $80 or $100 a year for taxes. So you're basically looking at 10 or $15 a month for taxes. It's not zoned as residential. I think it's just zoned as vacant land, which means you can do water collection and get a container and collect your own rainwater. It is close enough to public utilities. You could hook up to it. You could buy a little bit of solar and live off grid, or you could connect to the grid and pay, I don't know, a $50 electric bill. But this is 20 grand. And if you finance that out, you're looking at $100, $200 a month. Or you could save and buy the land or put a down payment on it and buy the land outright if you could get that much money together. But I would start with financing this land, get the piece of property, get a loan, pay $150 a month or whatever it is, and just buy the land. And then as you make, in the course of a year or two, even if you're making $15 an hour, you could pay this down and pay this off in a few years. It's not going to take forever. You could go out and find an enclosed cargo trailer like this, $5,000 for a 7-foot wide by 16-foot trailer. And you could build this out. A couple 2x4s and a cheap mattress. You can make a bed in here. You could get, a stand-up shower for $500, some cabinetry at Home Depot or Lowe's. Put together your own rig, like I did in my bus. I did that on my bus. Here's a 110 watt or 120 volt, 10-gallon plug-and-play electric water heater. This you can run off solar. You could easily run this off. If you have a 1.5 gallon per minute shower head, this is enough to give you a 6 or 7 minute shower. Plenty of time to wash up. That's $300. There's ways you could build out a trailer like that. But here's a 2005 Forest River trailer. It's got propane hookups. It's got interior. It's got interior kitchen, stove, oven, a sink. Electric's already wired, lighting, air conditioning. It's already put together. It's got a bath that actually has a tub and a shower in it. It's got a little bedroom in there. One guy could sleep here on the couch. The other guy could sleep back here and financing something like this, I don't know how much it'd cost you. $5,000. What would a payment be on that? $80 a month? Something like that. I don't know. $80, $100. So all of a sudden, for your home payment or for your land and your little trailer, enough to live on, you're looking at maybe paying $300 a month. That's a whole lot cheaper than $1,800, $2,000, $1,500 in rent. It's doable. You have to have decent credit. What if you don't have decent credit? Well, if you're renting, save up enough to buy the trailer, save up enough to finance the land. Maybe you need to put a couple grand down on it or something or other. There's people out there that do finance by owner. You don't even have to go through a bank. Put the two together. Now, all of a sudden, you've got a little place you can live that's certainly bigger than a car. You've got your own land that you can live on and eventually build a house on if you want to. But once you have these two and you get the trailer paid off in a year or two and you get the land paid off in a couple of years, you owe nobody. You owe $85 in taxes per year or whatever it is. You maybe owe $20 or $30 to the utility companies or whatever that is, because I'm sure you could get septic hooked up as well. It's not that far out in the woods. And before you know it, it costs you $200 to $300 a month to live on your own land in your little crappy trailer. And all the other money you can save or you can invest or you can prepare for the next big leap in life. And maybe you have to grind for a couple of years or several years. Maybe that's what you have to do. But the point is, now whether maybe like you live in a city and you might have to share a place with 3 or 4 other people, finding like-minded people that would share a place with you that's this small, it's going to be tough. But if other people are running into that trouble, I mean, it might happen. After I got out of the military, there was a buddy of mine and there was 4 of us actually. And we split a 2-bedroom apartment. 2 of us slept out in the living room. One guy got 1 bedroom. One guy got the other bedroom. The whole reason I'm saying all this is you can do something. Just do something. Make those sacrifices, but don't give up. And the earlier you live like this, the earlier you make those sacrifices in your life, the more you can invest, the more you can put away. Here's an investment calculator. And I know you guys don't want to hear this, but because no one wants to hear this really. But I just want to just show you, I just want to show you how just starting with something, if you're a 25-year-old guy and you're not going to retire until 65, right? And you're, or let's even start later, you're 30 years old. You want to retire at 65 like most people do. That's 35 years. If you look at the average return rate in the stock market across all the years, it's 10%. I'm going to put in 10%. Since 1950, I think it is. It's got a 10% return. I'm not even going to put in dividend. If you get a growth stock that also pays dividend, like McDonald's, like Verizon, like Duke Energy, you know, there's plenty of growth stocks out there that pay dividends. You might be able to make 13 to 15% a year, but I'm just putting in 10 years. And your additional contribution, well, you're going to start just $100 a month. Not much money because you're paying off your little trailer, your land, you're rooming with a bunch of people. I'm going to calculate, and contributing at the end of every month. There you go. Now, by the time you get to age retirement, just $100 a month with interest and everything else, you've put in $42,000 into the account. The account is worth $371,000. So even though you've only put in $42,000, your total interest is $329,000. That means that you put in less than the market put in, that just inflation puts in. Your small contribution gets you, so instead of retiring with $42,000 in your pocket because you stuck $100 under the mattress every month, not counting for, that doesn't really gauge with inflation either, at least you got $371,000. And if you say, yeah, but with inflation, that $371,000 is worth $42,000. Okay, but that $42,000 without inflation being in the market would be worth nothing. What if you do well and for the first 10 years, here you can see your amortization. Ending balance, you'd have, after 10 years, you'd have $20,000. After 10 years would be your ending balance. So let's say now you have $20,000 as your starting balance, and you only have 25 years left. But instead of putting $100 away, now you're doing well for yourself. You're able to put $500 a month away. How much do you end with? $890,000. But after 10 years of doing that, you've got $155,000. So we'll say you got $155,000. And now there's only 15 years left until your retirement. But now you're making good money. Everything's paid for in your life. You can stash it away. Now you're going to put in $2,500 a month because you own everything. By the time you retire, you've got $1.7 million. And maybe you say, yeah, but Joker, by then, $1.7 million might only be worth $200,000 today. Maybe so. But at this point in time, you probably also have, that land's been paid off. Maybe you built a nice little tiny home on it or something or other, and that market went up just like the price on my frickin' past house did. You know, I own this, 8 years? 8 years ago, this was a $180,000 house. Now it's $400,000. Maybe you buy that little tiny plate or a little plot of land and a nice little house on it, and the value skyrockets, and then you sell this and put that towards your next house. The whole point I'm saying is there's always options. I just don't, when I was young, everything, it felt like I was never going to make it. I couldn't afford college. I couldn't make enough money with my jobs to afford college. And they didn't have the loans that they have today. Man, that worked out great for me. So I entered the military, and then I got back out and I was making, I think, $5.25 an hour as a dishwasher at a place called Village Inn Restaurants. And I worked my way up from there to line cook for, I think, $7, $8 an hour at the same place. I also had a part-time job at the time. And then I applied to a bank that needed a customer service rep. I did that for several years, and I worked my way up from customer service rep to loan officer to collection officer to assistant manager to manager. And by the end, I was making $40,000 a year after 4 or 5 years. Not great, but that got me my next job with all that experience. That got me my next job with more experience. And so, yeah, you might not actually get to the job you want to get to until you're 35 or 40 or 45, like my case. But it doesn't mean your life sucks. It just means you can't afford Uber Eats. You use a cell phone that's 5 or 6 or 7 years old. You drive a bit of a hoopty car, that You wonder if it's going to make it to its destination every time you drive it. That's how we all started. And we made those sacrifices and we still made it. And it was a lot of hard work. It was a lot of hard work. But it doesn't mean it's a bad life. It's not a spoiled life. It's a hard life, but it's also a meaningful life. I have some of the greatest people I've met was through these jobs. I had acquaintances for years. I've met some great friends. I had relationships that I met from not necessarily the office I worked in, but within the company. You'd go to some of these events, you'd meet nice people, you'd maybe get a number. They work in an office down the road. You work for the same company, but not the same office. No conflicts of interest. Next thing you know, you're dating somebody from another office. I've had a wonderful, awesome life. I've lived every time an opportunity came up that might have moved me to a new state. I went. Moving with these companies, I grew up in New York and I went in the military. In the military, I visited Texas. I was there for a while. I visited New Jersey. I was there for a while. I went to Florida. I went to Utah. I lived out in Montana. I've lived in Maryland. Let's see where else. I lived in North Carolina. I now live in Tennessee. I've probably held, 8 or 9 different state driver's licenses. I've lived in probably 2 or 3 cities in each state of those. I've been all over the place. It's been a really interesting life. I just picked up my cart and just moved it every once in a while. And that's why I never owned a home until I got married for a long point in time. It was in the middle, and after I sold the house, I picked up my cart and moved again. I've been a nomad for decades, but I've seen the country. I've gotten to know a lot of unique people. It's been interesting. I just don't want young people to think today, or anybody, when I say young, younger than me, I guess is what I'm saying. I don't want anybody to feel like, well, it's over for me. It's too hard. There's no chance. There is a chance. You're just going to have to make sacrifices. And maybe you deem those sacrifices aren't worth it. That is your decision. And I hope it's the right one for you. But I can tell you, I sacrificed a lot over the years, and it seemed to turn out okay. And maybe it'll be harder for you than it was me. But I think you're probably going to be tougher about it and smarter about it than I was, because I didn't have any help from anybody that had been through it other than my father. I didn't have YouTube to look up how to build out a trailer, how to set up my own solar array, how to haggle and wheel and deal on buying land. I mean, the information of the world is available for you guys. I didn't have that. So in some ways, I think younger people have it easier today. All I'm saying is that where there's a will, there's a way. And I don't want you guys to get so bummed out because things are so tough for you that you give up. It means you might have to work a little harder than I did. Maybe you have to work a lot harder. But in the long run, it's going to be worth it. And that you can succeed. And you'd be surprised how life will open up and give you some opportunity. I was just looking at this online today. I don't remember how many people ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, said they're hiring. They said they've hired 1,000 so far from this program, and something they need 80,000 more or 60,000 more. I think I'm going to apply for this. It doesn't mean I'm going to do it, but you get a $50,000 cash signing bonus, $60,000 student loan repayment, and they pay you anywhere on some of these positions depending. And it's for women too. There's deportation officers, there's criminal investigators, general attorney, which I don't know what that means. I didn't look through this one. I looked at, I'm too old apparently to be a criminal investigator, but I'm not too old to be a meathead on the ground for a deportation officer. And I looked through here, and they do have certain, but I was former law enforcement in the United States Air Force, and the pay was, it's G7, so it's starting salary $50,000 to $90,000 per year, with a $50,000 signing bonus. I'm thinking about doing it. Then when I run out of content to talk about, I'll just talk about all the screw jobs I stuffed and cuffed. My point is, there's always options. Oh, traveling overseas, being an ESL teacher, English as a second language teacher over in Thailand or South Korea or something. Go get yourself that Asian hottie while you're making money. I just don't want you younger gentlemen to give up, even if it is harder for you than it was us. Now, I'm going to flip it over to my bus video, and you guys can check out my build and see what I put together and see how I turned a $6,000 bus and $10,000 worth of cash into a $15,000 mobile home that, if I was smart, I wouldn't have tried to drive across the country, only to have it break down and me having to donate it just so I could get back. At the time, my father was ill and I needed to get back home, and I couldn't hang around trying to fix that thing that much. If I were smart, I would have just bought a little piece of property close to my parents, parked the bus on it, and then instead of being in the home I'm in now, I'd probably have more money and be living in a bus down by the river. Anyway, check it out. This is a way I decided to get creative and make my tiny house, and I bet you could do even better. I am going to give you a bus tour today. I'm going to start with the outside. We'll go inside. If I can find, I have a bunch of photos and videos of my bus when I first got it and kind of some of the stages along. If I can find those, they're somewhere on a hard drive. If I can find those, I'll insert those to kind of show you where I started, and then we'll get to the finished product. If I can't find them, we're going to just jump right into the finished product. So let's go. All right, first we'll start with paint. I went with, instead of having to sand the whole bus, I just washed it and I put a one-step garage floor epoxy and painted it, and it's very tough and it's very hard and it's very durable and it's very sticky. So, and it's kind of a flat, so I don't have to worry about getting a nice shine or making sure everything looks even. The bumper here I sanded, and the grill here I just did with a rattle can. Same thing with the detailing that you see here. I just put a little piece of tape across there and did a rattle can for the black trim. The white is they have it for mobile homes and for RV trailers as a sealant, but it's a UV reflective. So the gray during a sunshine, I'll hit it with a laser thermometer. It'll be about 145 degrees, and this brings it down to about 110. Although when the sun's right overhead, it doesn't get that hot at all. And of course the red racing stripe because it makes it go faster. I took off the old school bus lights and instead I put in modern LEDs. And really that's kind of about it as far as the paint job goes. I had a hitch welded on here just the other day, so that is now, when the bus is running, it's got air suspension, so it lifts it up. So right now the center of the trailer receiver is at about 20 inches. When the air suspension brings it up, it's about 25, so I have a drop hitch level. I added in a trailer lighting, which from here is actually all the wiring for it's right up there, and then I just ran it down the corner here and out through the bottom of the bus. Down here, the only other thing I have is this is my water tank, 50-gallon water tank, exit nozzle. I have a little pump I can hook up to this if I want to shower outside of the bus, if I've gone swimming or something. I have my water tank fill there. And here's a double set bank of batteries. And I took out a bunch of fuses. This is a rat's nest of wires. But most of the stuff, this is the panel for all the things that had to do with the school bus. Sorry, I get my big fat hand in the way there. This is the panel that had everything to do with the body of the bus. The engine stuff is up there. So I took out all the fuses. I put in a new fuse line. And I left things kind of unrouted because I'm always having to fiddle with something. So I've got, these are for my backup camera, for my overhead lights, for my entry lights, and for my phone charger, things like that. But I kept it simple, so if something goes wrong, I can just reach in here, see which lit, which fuse is blown, pull it out, and fix it. I don't care about pretty. You'll notice in a lot of things, I don't care how pretty things are. I want to make sure that they're functional, and I can easily fix them kind of while I'm on the road. That's most important to me versus having things look all pretty. I mean, I do want it to look okay. Oh, and my chimney stack is up there, as well as I've got 8 panels that are 160 watts of solar each. So that brings in about, I think it's rated at around 1,300 watts of power. And on a good sunny day, I can bring in about 900. I took apart the original entryway stairs here. I put in wood instead. I took out the original dash and I put in wood just because it makes it easier to mount things. And also I've got 4 screws holding in this board, 4 screws holding in that board, and my windshield washer motor's right underneath there. So instead of having to take the whole dash apart, if something goes wrong in there, I can just pop it off. I've got my backup camera that I quickly wired in there. And let's see, I've got my backup camera switch I just threw into that, and then this is my running lights that I threw into there. Again, a lot of the wires and stuff are exposed. I don't care because it makes it really easy to work on. I've got just a little iPad here and a mount that I can use for my map and navigational things, and then I've got a little charger I wired in. And again, this will probably all get covered with a curtain or some panel to make it look pretty, but I honestly don't care. Threw in a quick fan. High-speed motor fan, that's the old school bus style. Curtains in the front, so I can pull those across at night. Same thing, curtains over here. And you'll notice I have all the curtains closed because I have a reflective foam in them for the summertime down here, well, in the winter too. So when it's below 50 degrees and it's above 80 degrees, I put foam in the windows to block it all off. I've got all my laundry in this one, my clothes, and this one, clothes. And then you can see I've got the rest of my cabinets. I've got my drone in here. I've got trash and a water catcher for my sink. I'll show you that in a second. But I have a nice, big, long workbench to do all my work on. And I've got hot plates and microwaves and stuff I can set on here when I want to. 3/4 or half-size fridge. I don't know. It's pretty big. Right now it's just filled with a couple of drinks that I've got in there. But it'll hold everything I need. Same thing with a freezer. Instead of ice cubes, I got some whiskey blocks because they can't spill when I go down the road. They're reusable. Dehumidifier. Full-size kitchen sink. So this is a full-size kitchen sink. I don't have the pump on right now, so I'm sure nothing will come out. Or maybe it will because of pressure. And then instead of doing an external drain, I just have it come down here into this little 3 or 4 gallon container. And I can just unhook it, take it out, dump it, put it back underneath. But instead of doing holding tanks outside the bus, if I do extremely cold winters, because I've taken this down to about 28 degrees, the insulation in it is R10 in the floor and in the walls. I don't have to worry about an external tank freezing, so I can just take this out, dump it, pop it back in. Cleaning supplies, and of course, trash. All my water and all that's run back there. So I've got both 12 volt up in the ceiling, as you can see here, and then I have 110 plugs that I'm running on a 20 amp fuse. So I've got, this is just an office, like an office bracket or an office extender. So the difference is that if it's 15, it'll have just the double plugs like that. But if it's a 20 amp, it's got a sideways plug like that. So I can run 1800 watt cook stove and things like that without any problems. Same thing over here. Got a little space heater for 1500 watts in case I'm in an RV park and I don't have, or don't feel like using my wood stove. And of course my microphone. And this is my setup for doing work. I've got my light panel there so I can keep myself well lit. My microphone audio control panel over there, laptop, and a little 17-inch foldable monitor. So when I'm traveling, I can just take that, fold it flat, and it won't slide off. And I hold some computer stuff down in there. Of course, chair. Wood stove. This will keep me plenty toasty warm when it's really cranking in the wintertime, even at about 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius. Keeps me plenty warm. Ash bucket, some tools, little axe to chop some stuff, tongs and stuff to fiddle. And then I use that to get sort ash out of it, but be able to keep the hot coals. Let's see, fan. And then a queen size bed. And that's about all there is to it. There's plenty of room underneath it, so a lot of my storage of winter clothes and sports stuff and extra food and all that's down underneath there. As you can see, I've got extra food in case things go south. I've got my CO2 and fire alarm up there. And then down back in here, I've got the bathroom. So this is just plywood underneath there, and then I did the same floor that I did out here, which is a laminate, or excuse me, what do they call that? Like a Pergo floor, which is a kind of a thick laminate. I did the same thing in here, but I coated this with a layer of epoxy to waterproof it, and I also painted that epoxy all along the boards and up the wall there. So this is kind of, and same thing here. You can see it's kind of shiny. So that's all waterproof. So when I shower, it'll go down the drain, but if it splashes up or works its way up the wall a little bit, it's still all waterproof. Compost toilet. That's the urinal in the front that I can just take out and dump. And then, of course, the compost that you turn. So when you use it, and the reason why I did this again is because I don't need the blue fluids. I actually haven't used it yet. So this brownish stuff is just the peat moss. But when you pee, you keep it closed like this, and it runs down the front and goes into here into the front tank. And then when you want to go number 2, you open it up, and you can see it's all peat moss. And again, I haven't used this, so I'm not trying to be gross or anything. It's just all peat moss. And so when you go to the bathroom, you just kind of stir it all in there, and it'll compost. And I've got the vent out the side. Frosted windows so you can't see anything. Shower head here. I just hung my trash over that for the moment, but full shower head, shower curtain. So it all works out pretty well. And let's see, lighting in there I didn't turn on. There's my lighting inside here. But it's big enough to be comfortable. You're not rubbing your elbows up against anything. Back here, okay, this is a little bit of a mess. Couple cans of diesel, 10 gallons of diesel in case I get caught somewhere between gas pumps. R10 foam, so if the outside of the bus here is about 140 degrees from the sun, inside here is about maybe 85 or 90 degrees, so it keeps it nice and cool. Same thing over here, same thing over the outside door. And then I've got my curtains to close off here and some old ball caps, backup camera. There's all my wiring for my trailer that I ran up to my main connectors up front, and vacuum. And then down here I got a hot water heater that I can plug in here if I need to. Flick it on, it takes 1500 watts, but that'll give me 4 gallons of nice hot water. This will probably make a lot of you cringe, but it's not pretty, but it's extremely functional. And again, I like my wiring where I can see what's going on and easily get to it without having to tear the entire bus apart. Solar comes in here down to this switch. So as you can see right now, I'm at 98%. I'm charging it 700 watts. And if I want, I have a safety switch here. So if something goes wrong, I can instantly kill the solar, and you'll see the watts go right down to back to draw. So it's pulling down. I have 4 kilowatt hours or 400 amp hours. Right here is now it's drawing, so you can see it's pulling down. But when it's charging, this blinks, and those arrows will be up, and it'll get 700, 800, 900 watts. This is my MPPT charge controller where I can go through and check the photovoltaic. It thinks it's night now because I just turned off the connection. It tells me the battery voltage. It tells me how much charge that I've put in. And like right here, you see I bring in 14 volts. And so kilowatt hours today, I've pulled in 2.6 kilowatt hours. And it is, what time is it? It is 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So I still have probably 4 more hours of sunshine, and I'm already at 90%. And overnight, even if I'm running everything, I only draw it down to maybe 60%, and that's running my computer, the refrigerator, my lights, recording, everything. And it goes into the inverter here, and this is a 2,000 watt inverter, which is more than what I'll need, or excuse me, 3,000 watt inverter, which is more than I'll need, and it comes out to 220 amp outputs. One comes up here, which feeds my computer line and my my refrigerator, and the other one here comes all the way down to this one down there, and that feeds my hot water heater and my cooking coil. So this coil here runs over, runs up, runs down, and runs, you can see I bring it down there and run it along the floor all the way up to where I have it on my main countertop there. Now, if you're wondering why I ran the electricity on the outside of the wall, I originally had a fuse box back here with 110, which would be just normal Romex like you use inside of a house, but something went wrong with it, and it was either tear my walls apart to fix it or just run external cable on the outside. I decided to do the external cables. So that, guys, is my bus. It is, it's done. There's more, I'm sure, once I get on the road. I'm sure there's some things that I'll want to change or fix or modify. I kept everything pretty simple. I just wanted a workshop and a place I could hang my head, and a place I could shower, a place I can do my YouTube videos from, and something I can drive and travel in as I go around the country. So it's nothing fancy. There's a million things I would have done differently. Now knowing what I know, I would have done a bunch of things differently. But you know, it's my first project like this. It's my first time really doing any 12-volt stuff. It's my first time doing anything with batteries, anything with solar, anything with 110 wiring, any work that I've done on this thing, any plumbing for the showers with water pump. Everything here was a first for me. I looked it up on the internet. I spent some time on RV forums, solar forums, on ways to repair water pumps on RVs. I mean, and YouTube. YouTube taught me a lot of this stuff. Now it seems the only thing I really watch anymore is YouTube and put my own content up, it seems. So updates, I'll probably give a little update as to where I am physically in my videos. So I'll be putting drone footage of areas that I am, and I'll get around to it eventually. I mean, a big part of me right now is going out to find some land and some property and get that purchased. And then I'm going to come back here and check on my father and the family, make sure that they're doing well. As you know, my father has Parkinson's and dementia, and things are kind of a little rough for him. So I'll be coming back and checking on them probably in 3-4 months. And then for the winter, hopefully I'll have a land and maybe a little house or cabin or something I can go up to. So this is my house, and maybe I'll be coming nearby to a town nearby. Maybe I'll be coming by a town near you sometime soon. English is hard. We'll see you soon.